this strategy, which will be the first of its kind in rugby, which is massively exciting. Other sports have been ahead of rugby. It's now time for rugby to sort of take this on. Everyone you speak to and anyone you speak to wants to do something about this.
Fast forward 10 years, what would success look like?
I think things have to be more advanced. It's about how can we use this emotional effervescence of being in a stadium to try and get that message to a stratosphere of people.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for coming along today to JEBCast. For listeners that don't know Jamie, he's an ex-professional rugby player. Jamie's move into sustainability aligns perfectly with JEBCast listeners. The move of sustainability is becoming faster and faster within the built environment in Hong Kong. And our conversation today is around how sport is integrating sustainability into it and how it's becoming a fantastic platform to talk about sustainability to a wider crowd. So it'd be great for you to just introduce yourself to the listeners and go for it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. So I played in a European Games, got a silver medal there with GB, and then I've won a couple of tournaments with Scotland on the World Series.
From professional sport to sustainability leadership, how what was the transition? Where did that start? Because it's not something that would immediately jump to mind.
No, great. Yeah, great question. I think that there's probably two key moments sort of that pushed me towards that. One was, so I studied an undergraduate in business management alongside playing. And I never went through school wanting to be a rugby player. It was literally the last few weeks of school, I got offered this contract with Edinburgh Rugby at the time. And I had a place to go and study law in Glasgow. But got offered this contract and thought, right, I'll do it as a gap year. And ended up that year I think I'm still the youngest player to ever play for Edinburgh. So that first year just went unbelievably well. And from then it was like, right, this is what I'm doing. But kept my studies going alongside that. And there was one module in particular on business sustainability strategies. And I just remember thinking, this is the future of business. Every business has to think like this, has to integrate this into what they're doing. So yeah, that was probably 2 or 3 years towards the end of my playing career. And I remember, picking that up and thinking that this is what I'm going to do when I finish playing. That then I probably still had my two worlds quite separate. I was starting to think about sustainability, still playing sport. But then before the Tokyo Games, there was a call with all the athletes that spoke about the importance of environmental action and why athletes are so well placed to take action. And that was like a big spark for me when I realized sport and sustainability sort of coming together. So that led me down a path of meeting some amazing people, learning some amazing things, managed to sneak my way onto the Masters at Cambridge in sustainability leadership and focus my studies there around sustainability and fan engagement through sport. So it's sort of alongside playing has got to that stage. And like I said, that I got to that Paris Olympics, and looking back on it, I had a lot on. I was doing this Cambridge Masters, which was full time in itself, trying to prepare for an Olympic Games. I was doing a bit of work in sustainability, sort of odd bits of work with the IOC and so on. And looking back, it was a lot of work, and I was pretty stressed with it all.
Yeah.
And then this job came up in Hong Kong, and it was just the stars aligned.
And do you think there's any sort of lessons that you take from professional sport that you can drive into a role in sustainability leadership within sports?
I think there's a lot of there's a lot of the mindset that you need working in as a sustainability professional that perfectly aligns with sport. You think about, as an athlete, aiming for that gold medal is a huge target. And look, it's a strange thing to sort of compare it with, but if you talk about the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the pollution crisis, the poly crisis that we're all facing, it is the biggest challenge collectively we as a sort of global village are facing. Now, when you have a huge challenge like that, being able to break it down into day-by-day action, turning up consistently, working hard, having a strategy, having a plan, never shying away. I suppose, there definitely are lessons, and probably why, potentially athletes are suited so well to working in sustainability when you're facing something so big and so scary. And, I myself, the more you learn about this topic, the more scary and pessimistic you become. But it's that, I suppose, consistent work ethic, having this big picture, but also breaking it down into small achievable steps. Yeah, I think there definitely is something that comes across from sport into the sustainability profession.
And do you think, I've always thought this sport, rugby, you've reached the pinnacle of that sport. You are clearly a guy that's on a lot of people's pedestals, quite rightly so, in the world of sport. Sustainability, I think, is a cool thing, but it's not generally seen as a cool thing. Did you ever sort of think you must have had a massive passion to do the right thing to drive you into that sector?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously from my point of view and the research I'm doing did on sport and sustainability and the impact that it could have, I want more and more athletes talking about this subject now. Whether they're not talking about it because it's not cool, I'm not sure. But as sevens players, we would spend a lot of time together. We'd eat together. We'd travel together. We'd you get to know each other very well. And around the sort of dinner table in the evenings after training, all the other players deeply care about this topic. Now, maybe why they weren't talking out, there's a couple of things. Two main reasons I'd say. One is hypocrisy. And, I myself was a sevens player. I flew around the world. Yeah. It's very difficult to then stand up and talk about sustainability, or certainly to yourself, you perceive it as, if there's a certain lifestyle that comes with being an athlete that flies around the world. Who am I to stand up and talk about this? That barrier in reality is much, much less. And I personally believe in the power that sport can have. Yeah. And the travel is obviously a negative part of that. But if you can use that platform to create change, I think we've got to double down on that. The other thing is not knowing enough. It's a hugely complex issue. I mean, the word sustainability itself can mean so many different things. So, I think they're the two reasons for me why athletes didn't speak out so much. But I was, I was part of a sort of, there were a lot of athletes that came before me speaking out, and then more and more as I sort of started becoming more public, and there's great groups now of collectives of athletes that are brought together around the world, Athletes of the World, Green Sports Alliance. There are these sort of groups of athletes. We've got WhatsApp groups and support each other. And I hope that by that sort of wave of athletes coming out and talking about this and caring about this, on the biggest stage at the Olympic Games, in post-match interviews, it'll just become the norm, and more athletes will, because I don't think that it's not cool. I think that there are barriers, but I think those barriers are coming down, and sport is realizing the power it can have.
Incidentally, I do think it's cool.
Yeah, so do I.
So sport, if you sit in front of the TV at the weekend and you watch football, etc., sustainability or climate change probably doesn't naturally jump to mind. But when you drill into it, sport is a huge contributor to climate change. Do you mind sort of going into some of the impacts that you've seen and some of the mitigations or some of the abilities that sport has to drive that change positively?
Yeah. So my research was very much focused on the fan engagement piece. There'd be a couple. There's one piece of research that I always reference. It was done by MIT, looked at global influence throughout time. And when it looked at the 1500s, 1600s, it was religious figures, it was poets, it was politicians. But if you look at 2000 onwards, 70% of global influence belongs to sports people. When I first heard that blew my mind. This platform that we've got. And on the other side of that, in the 1600s, scientists had a huge chunk of global influence. Now it's down at sort of 0.3%. So you've got scientists and governments that are aware of this huge problem that we're all facing, but don't have the platform to do anything about it. And then you've got sport that does have the platform and isn't doing anything about it. So there's that piece. There's trust and the level of trust that's tied into sport that brands are very aware of. There's a reason that they associate themselves with sports. Yeah. If you associate with someone's favorite sports team, you're buying that trust. And then the part that I got really interested in was the diffusion of innovations. So how ideas spread in social collectives and groups, fandom. These groups of fans around the world are the strongest groups in contemporary society. So if you want ideas, and all of these, if we want to get to a net zero economy, a sustainable environment, all these ideas are here already. All these people are imagining some amazing technology is going to come along and solve this crisis. No, all the answers are here. We need to transition away from fossil fuels. So, we need electric cars, we need heat pumps, we need solar panels, we need people to eat less meat, whatever it is, there's a set of behaviors that we need to change. And what I got interested in was how behaviors spread rapidly amongst groups. And fandom, the group of fandom that has these really clear opinion leaders in sports teams, in athletes, it's no longer you go to a stadium and sit for 90 minutes and watch someone play on a pitch, and it's now social media, it's TikTok, it's Netflix, it's Instagram, this sort of almost peer-to-peer relationship we've got with sports stars. That, for me, it is the most important way that we're going to spread these behaviors and do something about the climate crisis. So that sort of they're sporting terms, but offensive sustainability, what can sport do with what it's got, is the part I got really excited about. Now, obviously, there is defensive sustainability as well, and sport has a huge impact in terms of carbon, in terms of pollution, and mitigate and doing what you can to make those as small impacts as possible is one thing. That's the defensive part. For me, the offensive part is where the huge opportunity is.
And you talked about sustainability being a massive word, and I think we all think of greenhouse gases and the planet heating up, climate change, etc. But when you think of what sport's done for diversity, it's it's huge. Women's sports, football, rugby. I've arrived in Hong Kong 8 months ago. Maybe you have been more exposed to women's rugby, but I've been blown away by the amount of women that are playing rugby here, and the quality of the game is unbelievable.
Yeah.
How have you seen sports impact other areas of sustainability within your line of work?
I mean, socially there is so much, and you've got to remember, sport, I suppose, started off as this community thing that has now grown a professional layer around it. So there's a lot of social, particularly maybe less so in the environmental piece, but I remember when I first started sort of doing some work with Scottish Rugby and sat down, and I'd been there for 13 years as a player, and we sat down and sort of looked at, right, how do we baseline what we're doing already at the moment. There was things I had no idea that were going on, things like the homeless World Cup that they were running, and there was some stuff around refugees. I think some of the stuff that's going on in Hong Kong is amazing, with the Rugby for Good, and they're doing programs for helpers, programs for deaf kids, programs for refugees that come here, and language is a barrier, how we can use sport to help them. And I do, particularly on the sports side, quite often I think, and this is where it comes on to strategy, but quite often sport does the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and someone sat at a desk and the right thing comes across, they think, yeah, we should do this, and it's done. What I'm working on, and hopefully, I mean, by the time this podcast comes out, we're planning on launching this strategy around the Hong Kong Sevens. But the idea of a sustainability strategy that looks at social and environmental, breaks them down into pillars, the point is that it allows you to see all the different areas, and it's not just something comes across the desk and it's good and you do it. It's more of a strategic approach of gathering together what we're doing already, sure, and that is a big part, because like I say, sport has all this baked into it already. This social aspect is massive. So it's about how can we measure that, how can we present that, but also where are the areas that we're missing, where are the areas that we're doing really well, how do we present them, where are the areas that we're not doing so well, how do we do something in that area. So this strategy, which will be the first of its kind in rugby, which is massively exciting. Other sports have been ahead of rugby. It's now time for rugby to sort of take this on. World Rugby have a great environmental strategy. Munster Rugby have a great environmental strategy. There are a few social strategies, particularly in rugby league, that are strong. But this sustainability strategy approach that other sports are doing, I'm hoping that within Hong Kong, it's about getting things right as for us as a union, but it's also about hopefully inspiring change across rugby. And I'd love to see a ripple effect of other rugby unions, following suit. So it's an exciting, and Hong Kong have long been leading in the environmental space. They signed up for the UN Sports for Climate Action in 2019. They were the first by a long way. Wow. So yeah, it's why this role, I'd done some stuff back home, like I said, and sort of talked about sustainability, but wasn't quite getting it across the line. And then this sustainability role came up here, and it was tied in as a whole pillar of the strategy here.
Wow.
And it's just, I think there's just such a huge opportunity.
And what sports are leading the way in sustainability? You mentioned other sports that are driving that change. What sports are?
Sail GP is one that has been built almost with sustainability first and sport on top. So, a lot of these sports, Hong Kong China Rugby included, it's been the sport, and then you're looking at how can we make this sport more sustainable. Sail GP, Formula E, Extreme E, these sports were almost built with the sustainability message first, and then how can we use sport to get that message out there, which I think is so cool. And you can see, and the other part of this is the commercial part, and you can see these sports are just growing and growing and growing because that ties in so well with what corporates are trying to do, what governments are trying to do. Having that message core is such an opportunity, and one that I'm really keen to drive here. A point on that, I sort of spent my 5 years as a player in the sustainability space. I'd read that about all the stuff I talked about fan engagement and influence and all this that sport had. And I would speak at conferences, and I'd sort of have these panels and keynotes and podcasts, and I'd talk about this. And I kind of thought, by delivering that message that sport has this platform, that would be enough for sport to realize, oh, we've got this influence, we need to do something. And it just didn't happen. So that was when I got really interested in how do we commercialize it? How can sport use sustainability as something? We've got all these behaviors and ideas and all these things we need to spread in society. Sport has the platform. Surely that got me thinking, sport surely can use that as a, almost as like a impact delivery unit, say. Yeah. So if you've got a government or a business that wants to deliver a set of behavior changes related to net zero or the sustainable economy, how can it use sport to deliver on that? And it's almost the next level of, it's quite a static sport sponsorship. You pay a sports team, you stick a name on a jersey, you stick your name on the stadium, whatever it is, it's quite a static thing. Whereas if you're a business and you can invest in a program that's going to create X amount of environmental positive change, these sports teams, particularly here, you've got the premiership teams here and the community teams here that are embedded within communities, have such an opportunity to create positive social environmental change. If you can create that change, capture that change in data, present that change in the right way, for me, that's a commercial asset that you can sell to a business
hugely
who can own that data. They can say, by investing in this, we have changed X amount of lives, we have mitigated X amount of carbon, we have picked up X amount of litter, whatever it is. But for me, that is such an asset that sport has. So we've got this platform. How can we? The mindset has changed from we need to do something about it, sort of maybe Greta Thunberg approach that maybe didn't work quite so well. Whereas I'm getting really excited now about this is the next. If you've got a business that has £2 million to spend on sports sponsorship, but £20 million to spend on decarbonisation, how can we get into that pot of money? So I think it's a huge opportunity.
And obviously sport relies on, to an extent, what's jumping into my head is the first month I spent here was exceptionally hot and exceptionally humid. And I watched guys train and, really struggle with the heat. With global climate change and temperatures going up, how do you think that will affect sports and the sports that people love? Yeah, no, it's something I'm worried about. So I've brought my boots out and I'm playing a bit of rugby out here, and I'm worried. I arrived here in October when it was just getting cooler. I'm worried about pre-season in the summer. There's some great reports out there. There was one report that I had a bit of a contribution to called Rings of Fire that came out ahead of the Olympic Games. The World Rugby report that they came out with was amazing. They looked at the impact of a 2-degree world and a 3-degree world on rugby. And bear in mind, we're already at 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Yeah. So at 2 degrees, I think it was an average of 4 days extra over this level that it's deemed unsafe to play rugby. So I think above a 36, 37 degree wet bulb temperature, it becomes potentially fatal. And there's awful instances from around the world of sports people, heat illnesses, heat strokes, even death from heat, especially at the top level. Taking Olympic Games, you've got the athletes that go into the Olympic Games. They are there because they push themselves to and beyond their limits. So when you add on extreme levels of heat stress, there is a fatal element there. So this report at 2 degrees found 4 extra days above that level. At 3 degrees of warming, it found 30 extra days above that level. So you're losing a huge chunk of playtime, added to which you've got
marine level sea rise. I think 1 in 10 stadiums in the UK, rugby stadiums, were found to be at risk of marine level. Extreme weather events, obviously here, black rain events. There's so much science and data that points towards all of these levels going up. Again, coming back to the commercial point, if you're looking at Scottish rugby, most of their income comes from 5 games a year in the Six Nations. If one of them can't happen because of an extreme event, you look here that you've got the Hong Kong Sevens is by far the biggest revenue generator for if there's some sort of extreme weather event and that cannot be played, it's a huge financial impact. So when you combine that risk, first of all, the fatal risk to athletes, to the heat risk to spectators, plus the risk of actually not being able to run the event itself. Either your insurance premiums are through the roof or you're making a straight loss. There's an imperative to do something about this. When you combine that with the fact that sport, like I'm saying, has the greatest platform to do something in this space, this was my first sort of, that first 5 years I talked about, that was my argument, was just like, we have to do something. Why aren't we doing something? So then add that to the commercial impact. It's just, it is such an opportunity.
It's a massive marketing platform, isn't it? Well, clearly people are starting to recognize that. And the Formula E speedboats that Rafa Nadal's got a team, and there's a couple of other famous sports people that have got their own Formula E teams, which I guess is that step towards really using sustainability as a vehicle, sport as a vehicle.
Yeah, and I think sports will get left behind unless they change. Because these new sports that are coming out, they've got technology, they've got data, they've got this sustainability messaging just right, and you see these sports going through the roof. And that traditional rugby, Blazer, Twickenham, I can just see rugby getting left behind if it doesn't start doing, something the right thing.
What is the impact of something like a major event, something like the Hong Kong Sevens? What's the sustainable impact? Is it measured?
Well, firstly, for the stadium itself, moving to Kai Tak as someone coming in and working sustainability is just a dream, because we've got this brand new stadium that's been built to every sustainability standard. It's just, we went and did a tour of the stadium, and everyone else was out looking at the pitch. I was down into the bins looking at the recycling setup. But yeah, you can see that it's been built to all these, and it's got water fountains in place. It's got district heat supply. It's got biodiversity on site. It's incredible. Now added to that, there's and I'm working very hard on this, but when you're then talking, they're trying to get this thing open for the Sevens, right? So when I'm sending messages about compostable cups and they're just focusing on getting the doors open, hopefully we get that stuff right in terms of how it's run on the day. I think it's probably all the more reason because things are so busy. If I'm laying out the what to do, hopefully we get that across the line. If not this year, definitely going forwards. So yeah, the main thing is we've got this world leading stadium in terms of sustainability, which is for me is just incredible. The big impact comes from fan travel. In any sport, and that's and the last mile of travel in Hong Kong is excellent. The sort of the public transport that's in place here is world leading. So we have done. I've got measurements that'll be part of this strategy coming out, and that last part is very good. But the international travel is obviously an impact. Potentially there are opportunities here when you've got a partner like Cathay, maybe there are opportunities to work on, this now that we know that this is in numbers.
Consolidating travel and...
There's maybe opportunities to work on that. But travel, until there is and someone on my course was working on sustainable aviation, and I hope, for sport's sake that we have and it's not going to be one sort of silver bullet that fixes that problem, but there are people, very, very clever people working on that, and hopefully that is the future. But yeah, in the time being, fan travel is by far the biggest impact, 80-90% of emissions plus. So for me, it's about these stadiums and bringing people together and the emotional effervescence that you get within a stadium, how can we use that to create the change that we know it can? So we know that this fan travel is an issue, but what can we do, having brought people together and all the social benefits and the drama without consequence of sport and the benefits of going and watching and enjoying, and topophilia is a word that I picked up that I didn't know what it meant. Topophilia is the love of place.
Okay.
And that, when you're in a sports stadium, you love the love for your city, the love for your environment is shown to be, through the roof.
Right.
And that is really closely linked with a desire for sustainability action. So it's about how can we use this emotional effervescence of being in a stadium to try and get that message to a stratosphere of people. There's no other collection, other than a sports stadium, really, where you get, if we're going to get to this net zero sustainable economy environment, we need everyone in all their jobs doing something.
Yeah.
And a sports stadium is a collection of everyone in all different jobs where you can approach them and reach them, within this sort of this bubble.
Yeah.
You don't get that cross section anywhere else, really.
And the different generations, I imagine, as well, because
Absolutely.
you've got everything from kids to grandparents in a stadium, and I guess their mindset towards the subject of sustainability is going to differ. What an amazing. So, what's the plan? How are you going to communicate at the Sevens, for example?
Well, it'll start with us, doing things right and having this new stadium and talking about why all the sort of built-in sustainability initiatives are there is going to be important. Like I said, things like getting the cups right.
Yeah.
If it's all very well having an awesome stadium, but if everything's served in plastic cups, it's that messaging is just lost. Hopefully we get that right this time round, if not certainly next time. But it's showing and what you're doing, and there's some initiatives that I'd love to get in place around gamifying things like recycling behaviors and
Great idea.
once you break it down into these different areas, hopefully we can get some sort of promotions running on the day that can speak to people and just, I think the important thing is not preaching and asking people to do X, Y, Z. It's doing it yourself and talking about why it's so important to you as an event, as a business, and I think that's what resonates.
I watched a video, actually. It was called "Sell the Sizzle, Not the Sausage," and it was about a very good sales trainer a number of years ago who talks about people not wanting to buy sausages, but actually, if you sell the sizzle and the noise of the sausage in the pan, it's a lot easier to sell. And if we sell sustainability in that way, rather than the doom and the gloom and the sea level rising, etc., I think it's a much more palatable and more engaging way to sell it. So totally on board with that. So in terms of innovation, when we think about global temperature rises, have you seen any innovations in any sports emerging that are directly linked to that?
One that I love and would love to sort of copy and use in Hong Kong China Rugby is the Impact League that Sail GP run. So that really ties into competition, and what sport has is competition, and there's been some awesome stuff that's been run. Things like the Premier League, Sport Positive came out with I think they ranked all the Premiership teams on their sustainability efforts, and it was a great story where the team that was ranked last put a load of effort into it, and the next year came first or second. And it's that competitive element of sports teams battling, make that about positive impact. And the Impact League is taking that a step further and looks at what they talk about is a race. So it's obviously a sailing race that happens on the water, but there's a race that happens off the water as well. And it's a separate trophy where the teams, where they travel around to their different stops, look to implement social, environmental action. The racers get really bought into it. They're really invested in it. And at the end, they sort of crown a winner. So I can see
gamifying.
Exactly. Just buying into that competitive element, because exactly. That competition is on the field. Why shouldn't it be off the field?
Yeah.
And I'd love to get going in Hong Kong with the teams that we have here, potentially starting with the Premiership teams, some sort of maybe split. There's a 15 game season, maybe split it 5 games. There's the sustainability strategy that we're looking at has a section on our people, our planet, and social impact. Maybe split into those 3 5-week sections and have all the teams in that first section looking at our people, going out and doing work in that area, all of
so
them
cool.
competing, coming back, presenting the data, and then you crown a winner at the end of the year. I just think, getting that competition element of sport, getting people competing for positive impact is just a huge opportunity.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I could buy into that. I'd love to be a part of that personally. So what's the future of sustainability in sports?
Like I said, rugby's been slow on the uptake. I think it has just been capacity. Everyone you speak to and anyone you speak to wants to do something about this. The great thing about this role that I've come into is it is a specific role with sustainability in the title, and I am working on this. It has to not be owned by me, and I'm being very careful to make sure that we've got input from across the business and stakeholders and fans and players, and some sort of task force that drives it forward. It can't be the sustainability manager's plan; it has to be the business's plan. But having the capacity to actually put the work in and get this stuff across the line, I think, is lacking in other rugby unions. I'd love to see rugby unions all having a sustainability
How many other
manager.
rugby unions have this role?
None, as far as I'm aware.
Wow.
Club wise, there is a bit more action at club level. I mentioned Munster Rugby, who've been great.
Yeah.
There are some of the English Premiership clubs that have done bits and bobs. It's not been strategic, but they've got a green game, or they're sort of interested in the right area. But you need capacity. This isn't something that can sit across a number of different people's desks. You need someone that can drive this forward. So I think for rugby, that the future is definitely these roles coming into place, and hopefully, like I said, I'm so interested in this commercial side. I think once that's proved, you'll start seeing other unions sort of turning around and getting interested. But hopefully by leading the way, it creates that change within rugby. I think the future of sustainability in sport is already pushing on. Like I said, the Formula E's, the Sail GPs, they are absolutely leading the way. Rugby needs to catch up pretty quickly.
So sports marketing, fandom, topophilia. Fast forward 10 years, where you're clearly exceptionally passionate, and you're seeing loads of different angles to drive sustainability. Fast forward 10 years, what would success look like?
That's a good question. I think it's such a huge, like I said, it's that Olympic gold medal mindset. It's just like, we're not going to have solved sustainability in 10 years. There's no silver bullet here. I think, hopefully, I just think things have to be more advanced. There's a lot of these, this strategy that we're coming out, I've sort of tried to lay out with, measurable, achievable targets that are set by years, and that takes us to 2030. So there's sort of a roadmap there. Beyond that, it's got to be that offensive and defensive mindset. I'd hope to see a lot more in the offensive space, using that platform. Every event you go to, I'd love to see sustainability, the main message that's delivered alongside the game itself. And then defensively, sustainable aviation would certainly help for fan travel, but doing something and removing the negative impact, especially in a city like this where the last mile of fan travel is so easy to deal with. I would hope that that defensive mindset, the impact, the negative impact of sport was, getting close to zero. And that positive impact was being maximized.
Amazing. So circularity is something I'm hugely passionate about. In our world in JEB, we see a huge amount of waste going to landfill, and whilst Hong Kong is getting a lot better, the landfills here are overflowing. If you ever get a chance to go and visit the landfill, it looks like a bin that literally needs emptied. How are you? What's your perception of circularity as an economic model when you consider economic models of the past and the damage they've had?
I mean, commercially, it makes total sense, as well as what is needed for the environment. If you've got this natural cycle and technical cycle, All the sort of, firstly, in the natural cycle is sort of these organic products. If you can use these organic products, get them back into the soil, that's a natural cycle that will take care of itself. If you can keep the products in that technical cycle in use and reusing, and not, even recycling is more often than not is downcycling. If you recycle something, it becomes something of less value when it comes back. So designing things for disassembly, reverse logistics is a huge challenge. But if you can crack that and not only give a product to a customer, but find a way of bringing it back and mining it and keeping those, you effectively then own your raw materials forever. And you're just bringing it back in, creating something new, giving it to someone, taking it back in. It just makes total economic sense. It's difficult to get right, but for me, I just see that as the absolute future.
Capitalism, production, consumption, a huge economic model of the Industrial Revolution. What economic models do you think will propel sustainability more effectively moving forward?
That's a big question. I've been really inspired by Kate Raworth, Donut Economics. There is a huge question about post-capitalism. It's absolutely true that we're on a finite planet with finite resources. We cannot grow and grow and grow and grow forever. So Kate Raworth talks a lot about GDP and how that is the wrong, metric to be using. What does post-growth look like? If we can't grow forever, is it, stabilizing growth? Is it degrowth? It's a huge question. Donut Economics, I love her idea of we need to grow. We need to get beyond that. If you think about a donut, we need to get beyond the inside of the donut, below which, sustaining life becomes difficult, but we can't go beyond that donut. We need to be in that sort of sweet spot. So I think there are some amazing concepts out there. I think, it's just, it is becoming more and more obvious that capitalism creates these inequalities. It probably has been the most efficient way of growing. Yeah, absolutely. It's done a great job of distributing resources well. The invisible hand of the market. It's the way that things have grown so well. And you look at in the last 200 years, the unbelievable growth that has happened. It's been incredible, and there've been so many. It's been hugely positive, but there have been massive inequalities and that come from capitalism. There are the environmental impact and the social impact that comes, and we cannot grow forever. So there's got to be a new mindset.
Resources are finite. Shared values, Michael Porter's model that he developed. I've always been a big believer that big corporations, and sport is a massive corporation in its own right, have the ability to drive change. And if you look at supply chains of businesses that we work with in particular, a major organization could turn around to us and say, we don't want to buy any new furniture for the next 5 years. You're going to have to remanufacture and harvest what we own. What's your thoughts on the shared values framework, Michael Porter's shared values framework?
I think he's. I mean, another part that I love that he goes on about is that profit is magic, and if you can solve a problem while making profit, that's the way that you, like, thinking about charity. If you're take the capitalism model, if you're someone that's made a huge amount of money and then gives some of that money, and it's charity will always depend on that sort of philanthropic want to give, and that's not going to repeat forever. That's not going to grow. So I think there's the shared value. I think there is a good mindset in, if you can solve a problem and make money at the same time, it can be repeated again and again and again. And I think there's value in that.
Final thoughts. What one call to action would you give our listeners if there was anything you wanted them to take away and think about when they're at their next sports game or sitting watching TV? What would be your kind of one final thought?
A call to action. hopefully what I've got across is that sport has the opportunity to play such a massive role in this transition. The call to action, I suppose, I mean, for listeners as fans of sport, presumably, I suppose to speak to your sports team about how important this is. From seeing how these things work at internally in sports organizations, there is quite often sponsorship pressure. Quite often sponsors are further ahead in these things than the union are themselves. So there's sort of pressure coming from that way. There's obviously, hopefully with like myself as a player, I was trying to put pressure on the organizations. Fan pressure is massive. You fans are the ones that are there to enjoy the product. Tell your sports team that you care about these issues. I think that would probably be the call to action.
Thanks for joining today, Jamie. For our listeners, if you're interested in watching some more workplace-related sustainability topics, we'll be releasing more podcasts in due course. So stay tuned for more.